Hello, everyone. The lesson for today is titled The Trail of Tears. Here is the lesson essential question. Why was the Trail of Tears considered by some a shameful part of American history? As you can see, based on the lesson title, it's not going to be a joyous lesson. It's going to be a lesson based on sadness and a tragic event. Okay? Now, I'm going to show you a video, but before I show you a video, I want you to consider this scenario. Imagine that it is 3 a.m. on a cold winter night. You are sleeping in your bed. Then you hear a big bang on your house door. Then suddenly, soldiers break into your home. They tell you and your family that you have 30 minutes to pack up all your possessions because the house you live in is no longer yours. Furthermore, you and everyone you know will be leaving your neighborhood and will have to travel over 1,000 miles to a new place. Think about how would you react to that kind of scenario, and then you're going to do a response on slide 4. Now, let's get to a video which talks about this particular topic. The topic is the Trail of Tears. So please listen to the connecting video. Sorry, let me refresh. Here's the video.
Dear Tim and Moby, can you tell me about the Trail of Tears? From Brendan. Yeah, we're on part of it now. But the Trail of Tears isn't a single route or a geographical name. It refers to the forced relocation of American Indian tribes during the 1830s. The United States government kicked more than 60,000 Indians off their ancestral lands and made them march nearly 1,300 miles west. Yeah, it's definitely not one of America's proudest moments. At the time, parts of the southeastern United States were still legally controlled by 5 major tribes: the Cherokee, Chickasaw, Choctaw, Creek, and Seminole. Together, they were known as the 5 civilized tribes. Right, as if other tribes weren't civilized or something? Well, white Americans considered the 5 tribes civilized because they were fairly peaceful and adopted some of the customs of their white neighbors. They dressed in European-style clothes, they built roads, schools, and farms, and many converted to Christianity. The Cherokee even published a newspaper and formed a government with a constitution modeled after the U.S. Constitution. But none of it could stop the waves of white settlers who were hungry for more and more land. In 1803, the United States bought a huge amount of land from France in the Louisiana Purchase. With all this new territory, some Americans saw an opportunity to take over Indian lands in eastern states like Georgia and Tennessee. They just needed to convince the tribes living there to move out west. When gold was discovered on Cherokee land in 1828, white settlers demanded that the government do something about the Indians. So, in 1830, Congress passed the Indian Removal Act. Signed by President Andrew Jackson, the act authorized the government to negotiate land treaties with American Indian tribes. In theory, tribes would voluntarily give up their lands in exchange for money and new lands west of the Mississippi River. Right, in reality, it wasn't voluntary at all. Tribal leaders were pretty much forced into signing unfair treaties. The Choctaw were the first to leave in 1831, followed by the Creek in 1834, the Chickasaw in 1837, and the Cherokee in 1838. As for the Seminoles, a large group of them decided to hold their ground, and they ended up fighting a 10-year war with the U.S. Army. Eventually, though, most were forced out west onto Indian lands in 1842. Well, it was a Choctaw chief who first described the removal of his people as a trail of tears and death to a newspaper reporter. But it was the Cherokee removal that popularized the term. The law-abiding Cherokee tried to fight the government by going to court, with 2 cases going all the way to the Supreme Court. The court eventually ruled in their favor, but by that time, it didn't matter. In 1835, a small group of Cherokee went against the wishes of the rest of the tribe and negotiated the Treaty of New Echota. It sold all existing Cherokee lands for $5 million and promised that the tribe would move west to Indian Territory. Most Cherokee were furious, but there was nothing they could do. 3 years later, President Martin Van Buren ordered the army to enforce the treaty. On May 17, 1838, 7,000 troops went to Georgia to round up the Cherokee for the long journey west. Men, women, and children were driven from their homes at gunpoint and crammed into temporary camps in Tennessee and Alabama. Even before the journey began, many people in the camps died from disease and starvation. Of the survivors, a few thousand were loaded onto steamboats and barges to make the journey by river. The rest went on foot, marching over 1,100 miles to what's now Oklahoma. Exposure, starvation, and diseases like pneumonia and smallpox caused many deaths. Cherokee leader John Ross convinced the army to split up his people into smaller groups so they could follow different routes and forage for food more easily. Ross's heroic efforts saved many lives. But by the time the last groups reached their new home in 1839, close to 1/3 of the 15,000 Cherokee had died in the camps or on the trail. The Cherokee term for the removal translates to the trail where they cried, and that's how this entire era came to be known as the Trail of Tears. Thankfully, the Cherokee and other tribes were able to survive and preserve their history and cultural identity to this day. And in 1987, Congress created the Trail of Tears National Historic Trail, stretching through parts of 9 states to commemorate the tragic removal. It's okay to be sad. We need to remember the suffering of these Americans, not just to honor their memory, but to make sure that we learn from the mistakes of the past. Okay, let's get going.
So, that's the lesson relating to the Trail of Tears. After looking at this video, I want you to read the informational source found in this PowerPoint. Once that is completed, you're going to do this activity. You're going to complete a bubble map. The central question in this bubble map is, why was the Trail of Tears considered by some a shameful part of American history? You're going to use information that you found from both the PowerPoint and the video to come up with your own answers. Now, as before in a previous lesson, after you come up with your own answers for that question, you have to use evidence, either from the PowerPoint or the video, in order to justify your answer. And that's the lesson for this activity. Please let me know if you have any questions or concerns. Thank you very much.